No one on the public comment tonight or any speakers at all.
And not very many people online. Okay. So next item on the agenda is the approval of notes from our March meeting, since we did not meet last month. Any corrections to the minutes?
So the minutes in front of you right now say March. The minutes I sent online say February, but it's March. That is one item.
I make a motion to approve that. I didn't find anything. My memory also maybe served me well. I thought we were fine.
Sometimes you read through it, you're like, did I say that? I'm like, I guess I did. But okay, did you have?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Right.
You, any objection? And then pass. Thank you very much. Next item is the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Regional Principles for Equitable Development, which excitingly was just passed by but it was just passed by the county board at their April 24th meeting. So this won't be an action item, it will be an information item when Samia.
Yes, so Samia should be joining us shortly. Maybe it is a good time to do the announcements that you're talking about until she is online.
So while we wait for Samia to walk us through the regional principles for equitable development and what impacts that has on the housing division and planning division and how we process, when we do planning and programming for housing. There was a meeting of the advisory group chairs with the county board office. I think it was April 30th. And they talked about a number of things. One is the General Assembly had passed new electronic meeting procedures for us. Some of you might have just heard, but it will allow us to have more virtual meetings. They are a bit confusing and complicated when it comes to how virtual meetings work. It says that everyone has to have their camera on the entire time. You must be visible and people must be able to hear you, like members of the public. And if you go off camera for any reason during the meeting, you'll be marked absent for that portion of the meeting, which that makes no sense to me. So the county attorney's office is going to look into what that means. If we're going to have to start taking attendance minute by minute, or it's just in case we have a vote. Hopefully it's the latter. And there were a couple other things. We had a very spirited round of questions that no one had answers for during that meeting. We also talked about the interim Arlington County Advisory Group Handbook that the board and the board staff are circulating. And I don't think we've sent this out to everyone yet, but if you have comments or feedback, please read it. And I think just send it directly to the county board staff. I had a lot of concerns with a lot of the changes. They seem to be cracking down on what advisory commissions can do, which is already not a lot. And like restrictions on talking to the media, and you have to get cleared from staff and the board before you can say anything, and they'll tell you what to say, and it's not super transparent and open. And there were a lot of other restrictions on, like, we can't create a subcommittee without approval from the board. We can't go to other departments without going through staff and having that approved, like if we want information. So I sent a bunch of feedback and comments about my concerns, and they said that they were looking at them and plan to make a lot of changes based on what I had said, but would love to have you all weigh in and also provide your feedback so that we can make sure that these are good guidelines for us to operate under, and not unnecessarily restricting how we do things and making it harder for us to do our job. So we'll be sending that out. Alex, are you able to send that out to everyone?
Yep,
Okay.
I can send that out, and we have until June 11th to get comments in on that. So good amount of time.
Great.
And these changes are not pursuant to the General Assembly.
No, this is just the county board's office making changes. I think in large part because concerns of the Human Rights Commission, so they're cracking down.
Well, and they also apparently haven't changed that.
It's been a long time
in
since
like-
they changed it.
Yeah, 10 years or something like
Mm.
that, so.
Want us to send our comments to Alex or just
I
directly?
think Alex will provide instructions on where to
Okay.
send it.
Yeah, I can, when I email it out to you guys, I'll give clear direction on who to send them
So
to.
we'll be sending them as individuals, not as a commission.
Correct.
Yeah, and so let's do it. They'll be sent to me and I can make sure that, all of housing's comments get
Okay.
to the correct staff person. But I'll have more specific detail in that email.
Sounds good. And then also, we talked about safety at meetings and both virtual and physical. Apparently there was an incident, I can't remember what commission,
I'm not sure which commission.
but there were people who like logged on and kind of hijacked, like they started showing like video or images that were very inappropriate, and they were able to, I think, shut it down and like turn off the Teams meeting. But we had a conversation about what was the appropriate level of locking things down on Teams to ensure that stuff like that doesn't happen, while also allowing people to participate and kind of back and forth on like should people who don't sign up in advance still be allowed to provide public comment? I said yes. A lot of other people were like, it should be locked down so that we know exactly who's speaking and, you know, that they're not going to do what happened before. And we just talked about like security protocols in general, just making sure that people are safe. And so I don't know what's coming from that, but
So one change you will notice, like you see, this is Michael Heminger right here. It actually, I had to set options before the meeting for everyone not in our organization, meaning Arlington County, to be able to share their video and camera. So now I'm going to have to manually go through each person and allow them to speak.
So you can't unmute your own self?
So no, not if you're outside the organization. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that,
Well,
For sure.
except for when we have the,
well, you can raise your hand.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I was thinking when we do like our whole commission virtual, but we can raise our hand.
yeah. Well, when the commission has our virtual meeting, he will make sure in advance that
Yeah.
all of us have the ability to turn our cameras on and unmute ourselves.
Oh, self unmute, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, in that scenario, if it was all virtual, as the meeting started, I would just go through and unmute every single one of you so that you had the option to. do
Got it, okay.
Might have to get an assistant for you. I'm serious, because.
Yeah, some commissions are using too, so that is something might have to do. Might have to have someone virtual online helping kind of with the virtual lobby. Yeah, to help with some of these changes, but yeah, so that is one thing.
Are they making people, like people that call in? You know, there's like a waiting room, which I think is already happening. They have to put who they are, or how's that gonna work? Because I know there's sometimes people call in and you see like the last, I think 4 digits of their phone number.
Yes, I don't totally remember off the top of my head the call-in instructions, but I can also circulate that.
yeah, I was gonna say, so
So
they
that-
said that they sent you how it's gonna work, but they didn't share with us. Can you share with?
Yeah,
with
most of what they shared with us was kind of like the background of how to get the team set up in that sort of thing. But yeah, I can also put together some sort of information for you all and
Sounds
get that
good.
sent out.
And it looks like Samia is here. Hopefully able to unmute herself and go on camera.
Yes, I think she should be able to. So Samia, if you're ready.
Yes. Am I able to, hi, am I able to share my screen as well, or?
You should be able to,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Oops. All right, am I sharing? Are you able to see that?
Yep, we can see your screen with the
Flower.
flower on it.
Oh, there we go. You can see the presentation.
Now you can see the presentation? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Looks like it's in the
It's
presenter
in the
view.
Notes mode, but we can see it.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
There you go.
All right. Okay. So thanks for having me. I am going to be sharing with you all about the regional principles for equitable development. And I have a little bit of history in the slides just to give some context. I won't spend too much time on that because I want to go over the principles themselves and then talk a little bit about how they've been adopted and what we are looking to do with them. But I will start with just some background here. So you see a couple of goals here for what we call planning for equitable development. And this pretty much grew out of an initiative that Arlington actually was leading. So back in the summer, we started to think about, actually, I started to think about how to start to make racial equity a little bit more tangible to planners, housing, land use practitioners, people who pretty much have a role of being a steward or shepherd of our comprehensive plan. And I knew that in a lot of the work that we were doing around racial equity, it was a little bit more challenging in some of those areas and some of the disciplines that we work in to be able to see, while they understood the concept, what does that actually look like in the work that we do. And I started to think about it from the perspective of our comprehensive plans, that if we can ground principles for equitable development in the plans that we have for what we want to see around housing, transportation, land use, open space, all those different elements of our comprehensive plan, then what we will see in the outcomes would be equitable for people who experience those things, who have access to all of those things that we are planning for. And so in talking to some of my colleagues around the region, I understood that it wasn't just Arlington that was struggling a little bit with how to make this tangible, but it was other jurisdictions around the region. And so at the time, I was on the Chief Equity Officers Committee for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And so I took that idea to them. We started to talk about it. And then we said, well, why not make this a regional opportunity? And so the goals that you'll see here were part of what came out of those early discussions last summer, which was really to not only further our work, but it also furthered COG's work, because COG had been the convener for many local jurisdictions who were their members in advancing racial equity. All of our work started with them. They grounded us in that work back in 2018. And so that seemed like a great opportunity for them to continue to advance their work. And then the programs that they were looking to bring equity, and then also the local governments that are part of their membership. Also being able to provide some in-depth training for local governments that in the areas of planning, housing, and equity for our staff, so that we can understand some of the best practices and the tools and how we might be able to do this within our comprehensive plans. And then part of that was, as I was thinking about this opportunity, I wanted to make sure that they weren't just principles that we put in a plan and then they couldn't be implemented or they couldn't be tangible or actionable for people, but wanted to workshop principles that people thought could be actually practical in implementing them, so that we could see the outcomes that we were expecting. So those were some of the goals of the overall initiative. Just a little bit of historical context from a region. I think most of the jurisdictions are part of the report, the Uneven Opportunities Landscape Report. When we started talking about this work with the region, and most of the work that we do, we always try to ground ourselves in the history. And as you may or may not know, there are a number of reports, one by Urban Institute, one by the Northern Virginia Health Foundation, but they all talk about how there are differences in life expectancy. And so when we look across the region, it's a 27-year difference. And what we know is that a lot of that is based in policies, practices, a lot of them around our land use, housing, and zoning over decades, that are rooted in systemic and structural racism. And so, again, we always just like to give that context as to the why it's important when we talk about planning, when we talk about housing, when we talk about zoning and the policies and the plans that we have developed over a series of decades. So the value, and I talked a little bit about this before, but the value of this in terms of planning and particularly comprehensive planning. So for Arlington, we have 12 different elements of our comprehensive plan that touch on so many different disciplines. We have staff across the entire organization that have some role or some aspect of their work that touches on planning, whether it's, land use planning, whether it's parks planning, whether it's transportation, but all of that leads to creating places and spaces for people to have access to opportunity. And so why not the comprehensive plan? The value there is that it gives us that overarching vision or place or space to think about really grounding equity in our processes and in our plans for outcomes that we want to see. Again, making it tangible through the physical realm, through the built environment, because that's how people experience places, through the physical places that we create. And then making sure that we are coordinated and we are collaborating across not only the region, but even within our own jurisdiction. Like I mentioned, it's an interdisciplinary effort when we talk about planning. And again, implementation is really important. And most of the plans, well, actually all the plans we develop, because over time they get implemented, and what we see is the built environment and the places and the spaces that we create. So again, grounding those plans in equitable policies and practices and processes and outcomes will be the result when we start to implement them over time, or when they are developed, when those things that we put into the plan are actually developed. And that's when we'll start to see the results of that and the equitable outcomes that we are looking to achieve. So our partnership really not only was with COG, but we also leveraged our partnership with COG to include the Government Alliance for Race and Equity and Race Forward to put on not only a regional event and convening for us, but to actually help to provide some additional support and technical capacity and resources on how do we actually make equity tangible in our development and planning work. And so we worked with them on that and still have been working with them actually over the last several months. And so that process has looked like this. As I mentioned, in the summer, all the way up through the fall, we were designing this initiative. And in my mind, it was really just kind of a one-day workshop that was just going to be with Arlington County staff to bring them together across different disciplines to talk about the value, the means, and the methods to do this, to come up with guiding principles that we thought would be practical and valuable to include in our comprehensive plan. And as I mentioned, this became a regional effort. And so working with colleagues on the Chief Equity Officers Committee and COG, as well as GEAR, we started to design what a one-day workshop could be, just to first convene everybody to start to have some conversations on these topics, and then to start to workshop things. And so that resulted in a day-long event in November, where we brought together nearly 80 plus people across different jurisdictions and regions. They were housing practitioners, transportation, environmentalists, as well as land use planners across all of the different domains, across all the different regions. We spent a day just first being educated about the history and our past as a region when we talk about land use and planning decisions. And then we had a regional panel that talked about what we were doing locally within our comprehensive planning efforts to start to bring equity into those processes. And then we took the second half of the day to really start to develop a set of guiding principles that we as a region thought would be something that we could put into action. And we workshopped those. In December, we shared a draft of those guiding principles that had been developed in November with COG's Planning Directors Technical Advisory Committee, and we did the same in January with the Housing Directors Advisory Committee. And then we shared them back with the Chief Equity Officers Committee, because we really wanted to make sure that from the local jurisdiction perspective, everybody was able to see not only their jurisdiction in these principles, but that it would be tangible to them, that it was something that was actually practical, that they could see implementing as well as adopting. And then we also from February through May, we wanted to, again, not just develop these principles, but also to be able to provide some support to staff who would be implementing them at the local level to understand, okay, we workshop these principles, we developed them. Now, how do we actually implement them and what do they mean? So we started a mini series with COG that Gear led for the region as well in February. And that actually just, the last session just ended this week. I think there were 4 different sessions that they attended and really tried to drill down on these principles. So in March, we presented them to COG's Board of Directors for adoption, and they adopted them as Resolution R13 2024. And there are 10 of those principles. This slide here, I really just wanted to show you how we've participated over the last several months in the region. You'll see in one of the pictures there, Anthony Fusarelli, our planning director, with other planning directors in the region as part of that panel in November for our regional convening. And then the second picture at the bottom really just looks at one of the workshops that as part of the mini series. So you may identify a couple of our staff there, but in both of those events, we had at least 15 plus staff across the organization that participated in both of those, both the series, the mini series of 4, and then our regional convening as well. And I have links here, and I'll share this out with Alex to share with you all. But there are links to just the article and the information about the regional convening in November, as well as COG's adoption of the principles, and then the resolution itself with the principles in it. So you'll be able to access that. And so now I want to just go through the principles with you, and some of them are fairly lengthy, so I'm not going to read all of them, but I do want to lift most of them up. Like I mentioned, there are 10 principles, and they go from the first 3, which really focus on process, and then the last 4 to 10, I'm sorry, they focus on policy outcomes. And so the first one really is to acknowledge history and repair past harms. And it talks about really being able to document the historical harm caused to communities of color by actions of government through our planning, housing, and development, to identify connections between those actions and today's racially disparate outcomes. This is something that I think you will see, and maybe have already started to see, that we've already been doing this. We have our racial history timeline. When we did the work on the missing middle housing study, there was a lot of history that grounded that work as well. So that's something that, you know, we were already doing, but, you know, again, affirmed here that this is a really important part of the process when we talk about the work that we do in planning, housing, land use, and development. The second principle is really focusing on, it says to practice inclusive and meaningful community engagement. And so they're backwards here. So that's actually 3 on your slide, but it's number 2 in the process principles. And it's really requiring local community participation and leadership in decision making to really reflect a diversity of voices. And it also talks about using power mapping as an equity lens when we design our equitable engagement strategies and approaches as well, and making sure that we have voices that are represented in all of the work. And one of the important things in this principle that I also like is that it talks about building cultural competence in our planning process and designing planning processes and materials that are clear, accessible, and engaging for culturally diverse stakeholders. The third principle, second on the screen, is committing to implementation with internal capacity and community transparency. This really speaks to the organizational capacity and our work in terms of, you know, making sure we have budget, making sure we have resources, making sure that we have the structures in place for staff to be trained, to be able to move these principles in their work and engage in equitable planning practices. One of the things that it talks about here that I think is important, it says develop public-facing accountability tools designed with community engagement and tie them to meaningful budget and policy processes to measure jurisdictions' performance and monitor regional racial disparities. This is really much in line with our equity resolution, the County Board's equity resolution as well. And it lines up with a lot of the work that the county's been doing over the last several years as well. The next 7 principles that I will speak to, again, they focus on policy outcomes. And so the 4th one here is advancing economic opportunity and mobility. An important part of this is really promoting generational wealth building, local economic development, and entrepreneur opportunities, including local minority businesses participating in publicly supported capital projects and real estate development. We don't often talk about that as much in our planning, land use, and development work, but that is an important component of why we generate a lot of the development, why we do a lot of the work that we do, and that is to support economic opportunity and mobility. And we don't want to miss the opportunity also to think about the role of small businesses and local economic development in our work. And this also speaks to working with the private sector to avoid and mitigate displacement of businesses during construction of new projects and enhancing community services, serving establishments with capital and capacity building supports. So another important component also speaks to quality living wage jobs for people in all neighborhoods, which we hope that a lot of the work that we do in planning, land use, and housing in our development will be able to do. An important one, I think, that will resonate with you all, preventing displacement, the fifth one. And so I'll read this one in its entirety. And it says, develop government regulations, policies, and programs to mitigate economic pressures and allow anyone who wants to continue to live in a community to do so as it grows, especially for residents vulnerable to displacement pressures due to systemic racism and economic insecurity, and prevent displacement of small businesses that serve communities experiencing displacement pressure, including preventing predatory speculation of property in communities at risk of displacement. And so it's a lot there, but I think a couple of the things to highlight there is really, again, focusing on residents who currently live here and those who want to come, but making sure that we can allow people to stay who want to remain here. And then also it again focuses on small businesses and not displacing small businesses as well. The next principle focuses on expanding affordable housing options and preserving existing affordability. Again, I will read this one because I know that it will resonate with you all. Create and preserve healthy, safe, and long-term affordable housing for all family sizes, abilities, ages, and incomes to create integrated, inclusive communities in all neighborhoods through a mix of publicly supported strategies scaled to meet the actual housing needs of the region's population growth and communities that have experienced housing discrimination. So I think that speaks for itself, and a lot of the work that we have been doing, I think, speaks to this as well. The next principle, support and strengthen diverse community values. So this one really does focus on, and it uses a word that I like, respect, respecting the local culture, character, and diverse values of community by uplifting existing cultural resources as valuable assets of a community. Here is where I see the element of our comprehensive plan that focuses on historic preservation and cultural resources. I see that as where we would be able to implement that, and especially with the adoption of that plan most recently. The next one, promote people-centered multimodal mobility and connectivity. So this one speaks to transportation and prioritizing effective, safe, dignified, healthy, and affordable multimodal transportation choices for all residents. And so it also speaks to how having access to equitable transportation amenities then provides access to things like employment, education, health, and social services, as well as amenities. The next one speaks to develop healthy and safe communities. So really this one really talks to designing the built environment that enhances health opportunities for communities that are currently experiencing racial disparities in health through public amenities, and making sure that people have access to things like healthy food, physical exercise, improved air quality, and safe and inviting environments. And so this goes back to where I started a little bit about the social determinants of health and health outcomes based on where you live and what you have access to. And then the last one, promote and regulate for environmental justice. So this principle really focuses on regulations and securing resources to mitigate and reverse the effects of environmental hazards, past and present, that have disproportionately harmed communities of colors. And it speaks to working across government silos and across sectors to eliminate disproportionate and harmful environmental burdens on any community. And so those are the 10 principles in summary, and some a little bit more in detail. And what I think is really important to note here is that while COG adopted them in March, Arlington County was the first jurisdiction in our region to adopt them just this past April 24th. And so our board adopted them with a resolution, and they spoke to our equity resolution at the same time and how it really is consistent with that. And so I know you can't really read it all here, but this is a copy of what that resolution looks like. And each of the 10 principles in depth are attached to that resolution. And then I also have a link here to the board's adoption of it and what they spoke to when they mentioned it, when they adopted it. And so this is really important. How do we use this in our local context, and how does this apply today? So I think it's really important that, one, we've adopted the principles as a local jurisdiction. And that was one of the goals when we set out to do all of this work, that we wanted all of the localities to be able to take these principles and look at them and adapt them for their circumstances at their jurisdictional level. And so we've done that. And I think that that is an important first step, because what it does is it gives staff the support and the grounding that they need to be able to start to, even though some of these things we're already doing, but actually in earnest do it and use it in all of the decisions and all of the work that they are putting forward. And one of the places that you see highlighted here is in our comprehensive plan update, that these principles will be part of that and centered in our comprehensive plan update work. Also, for practitioners, our agencies, and our partners, being able to formalize these principles in a way that they form another part of our equity lens. So it means that we can operationalize equity when we do things like plan for housing, when we develop policies and we establish our processes. We can look back at these principles as a way to help guide how we do that. We use them to support our equity-based approaches to planning and development processes. And then, as I started saying, we are empowered. We give people the agency to actually be able to then incorporate these principles, to use these principles as a starting point and not as an ending point in what they do. And so I have a picture of the equity lens there, because for me, this is the what do we do, or what did we do? It's these things that we can constantly look back on, whether it's a new plan, whether we're updating a plan, we have these principles now that we can use to help center and guide us in that work. And that, to me, is the operationalizing piece of that. And so with that, I will conclude my presentation, and I am looking forward to any questions or discussion that you have. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see you.
Thank you, Samia. Very much appreciate all the work that you did to move that forward, and to also present before us today. And just so you guys know, Samia and I had met to talk about this last month as well. And we had a lot of back and forth about kind of what are the next steps, and one of them was having the board adopt it. So I was super excited to see that the county board did adopt it. But then from an implementation perspective, what does this mean for the work that the county does? And how can we make sure that these are really integrated into the planning and the policy making processes that the county has? So Samia, my question for you is, beyond the principles, are there plans to create like a guide or any additional more granular guidance for planning staff and folks involved in these processes to help them with best practices on how to implement these and what that could look like in our community?
So we've not talked necessarily about an actual guide for staff to use them. The first step will be making sure that everybody has them and that they've been shared out. I think we're in the process of the comprehensive plan update, and I think that that will be a really good place for us to start to help people actualize them, as we're going to be using them to center that work. And we are going through an extensive amount of work with staff now to be able to, one, be a part of that process across the entire organization. So I see these being something that probably real time will be actualized in that work. And that will be an opportunity for us to understand where and how and what other tools we may need beyond that to support staff in their work and using them. The other thing is they just finished a number of staff, just finished the mini series with COG that was designed to help people to understand how do you actually incorporate these principles into your work. And so the next step, I would want to be able to have a conversation with that team. And I know some of the natural team leads of that work were the team that working on the comprehensive plan update, to see if there are other pieces of information or guiding documents that they think might be helpful based on what they've learned, for more staff to be able to understand what this means and how they do it. So additional conversations to see what might be the best way to support staff in spreading this information more and using it more, I think is more the next step.
Thank you. When does the comprehensive planning, like the look at those plans, when does that start? And do you, when the public engagement part of that is?
The public engagement part probably won't be for several more months. I know we're starting the process now with internal stakeholders across all of the departments. We just did that kickoff about a month ago, maybe less than 3 weeks or so ago. So it'll be several months before it makes its way to the broader community. We're doing some internal what we call SWOT analysis. So, and some discussions with each of the different departments and divisions or teams that have a role in the comprehensive plan and have some relationship or connection to it. So it'll be a little bit of time before we are public facing with that work.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, feedback?
So for example, like recipients of Arlington County, like CDBG funds or AFIP funds, is that going to be incorporated into the applications that those entities would use to apply for funds?
So I can take the first part of that, Samia. So we do have on our multifamily affordable housing NOFA, which I know we have not had the last couple of years, but in that there is a racial equity and diversity section, which was newly added in the last round of NOFA we did. So we did try to make advancements towards that. Obviously, it's been a few years since the last NOFA. So when we do come back and, relook at those NOFA guidelines, that will definitely be something that we update with all the new information that we have. So that's to the multifamily housing side of it. I don't know if you had anything else to add, Samia?
No, I think so. I think that the other thing is, as you do a look at it now that we do have the principles, just making sure that as we go through those processes, if there are ways to implement any of these things as part of that process, they would be included there. Because one of the things that I like about the principles is that they focus not only on policy outcomes, but process. So there, I think, are opportunities to be able to incorporate these there as appropriate as well.
Well, but that does make me think, because SIDSAC just finished at the last meeting discussion of I think it's the 25 NOFO that will be coming out in June, I think, for the CDBG money. So this might, I don't know whether it's already that the cow's already out of the barn, but this might be something to note, that if there's any value in slipping any of this into that NOFO, that now's the time to do that potentially. I mean, some of that's dictated by CDBG and by HUD's requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
ability to put some of the local spin on, the local regional spin on it. So.
Any other comments or questions? I know Samia has, I think, a hard stop at 7:45.
Just a quick question. Are there other jurisdictions that are scheduled to soon adopt this? Is there any conversations with other?
I hope so. I talked to my colleague a lot in Fairfax County, and I know she is looking to do that. I believe Montgomery County as well. So a couple of the counties are talking about it. I think it came up at the last mini series in May as to how many other jurisdictions are doing this. And I'm hoping that our example is something that others will follow, and they'll do that, because that, again, was part of the point as well, as we want to see more of the jurisdictions, all of them actually adopt this. That's the value as a region collectively. If we've all taken this step, it helps us all to advance equity. So, but hopefully Fairfax will soon.
The last question, comment? Okay, well, thank you so much, Samia. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
all the work that went into this. Excited
Thank
for it.
you all. Bye.
And just for everyone's awareness, that's no longer an action item, because at the time when we made it an action item, we thought the board hadn't adopted it yet, and since they have, now it's just an information item. It's not often that the board is ahead of us, but in this case, happy for it. So the next item on the agenda is the Legislative Priority Subcommittee. And normally this is something we talked about over the summer, so people may be asking, why are we talking about this now? Well, I would like us to form a Legislative Priority Subcommittee early, so that it's not sort of a last effort like we had last year to try to put things together. And there's some other context as well. So I don't know if it was a February, March meeting, I talked about how I'd been talking to staff, talking to the board, talking to planning commission about trying to put together a subcommittee that would be focused on making recommendations on how the affordable housing ordinance and the enabling legislation at the state level could be improved so that Arlington gets a better deal. The board would not like us to move forward with that at this time. So given that they don't think it's a good use of our time, I think last year I had recommended to the commission that we didn't include it on our legislative priorities because we wanted to try something that was more robust. This year, I think it's good to include our legislative priorities and let the board know that we do think this is important and we do want them to focus on this, even if it's not happening this year, if it happens next year. And I think there's other items that make sense for us to do some research on and come up with some really solid proposals for the county board to consider, sometime in the next few months. And I was hoping, I haven't talked to you, Nikki, but I didn't know if you wanted to chair that again. I think you did a good job last year. Not to put you on the spot, but. All right, great, okay. So questions or discussion from other commissioners on that?
What does the meeting schedule look like?
So that will be determined. So I think it depends on, how many people want to sit on it. And I mean, the subcommittees, there's no set, like it has to meet once a month or something. It can meet as many times as they want in coordination with staff support, because they are public meetings, so they still require staff to do the work to make it accessible to the public and advertise and everything. But I'm thinking, maybe if we could have recommendations by like September again, that would probably make sense. But we can, we can meet as a subcommittee and figure out what that looks like. But I think that there's a number of things both that we talked about last year, as well as probably some new things that it makes sense to try to pursue and include in our recommendations. And this starting earlier would give us probably a little bit more opportunities to talk to other commissions, to talk to other jurisdictions like Alexandria and Fairfax and their housing advisory groups to see if, we can collaborate and share information as well. So. Yes.
I just want to endorse the idea. I think it's a great idea. I've thought a lot about ways we could improve housing law at the state level. Be happy to be part of it.
Great. Just show of hands, people who were interested in serving on the legislative priority subcommittee.
Doris said she was also.
Okay, great. Very cool. Okay. Any other discussion? Yep. Okay,
Sorry, Kellen, I have a comment or question.
yes.
So, since this is also like an election year for even local, there's some that are kind of have their opinions about stuff that, should we need to take? Is that something we should also take into consideration because there kind of might be different voices, ideas coming through in November with this legislation and it's kind of a big election year locally, nationally.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always important to consider the context that we operate. At the end of the day, we serve at the pleasure of the county board. So they don't like what we have to say, they can fire us from our unpaid role from the commission. But, generally, I think we should try to give them recommendations that they're receptive to. Like if they absolutely don't want to touch something, it probably doesn't make sense to ask them to, within reason. I mean, there's certainly things that I'm passionate about that, I am fully on board with going to the board and saying, I don't care if you don't want to do this. I think it's so important that you should. It's, this is important for the community. So yeah, I think that's something to keep in the back of your mind, but I especially wouldn't, the primary hasn't happened yet. We don't know, who's going to be in the general election. We certainly don't know who's going to be on the board next year. So yes, it's important context, but I wouldn't let that drive the recommendations or even the discussion that we have. There may be people that individually as commissioners we agree with or we don't agree with when it comes to housing policy. We're going to try to work with whoever is there until we step down or they ask us to step down. So that would be my recommendation. Yes.
Just a note, I think it'd be good to have this commission look at new bills, and I think also as well as the Virginia Housing Commission is going through their summer meetings with current legislation. So I think it would also benefit this subcommission to look at the Virginia Commission and perhaps like once they, maybe in parallel, like can track those, then deliver this can be done in the subcommittee, but maybe, okay, here's the new bills and here's current bills, our feedback. How they relate to Arlington.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think on this topic especially, there's so many like inputs and information that we go to. So having as much time as possible to try to gather. Obviously, we're not going to be able to capture everything, but to be informed as possible as we try to make the most solid and impactful recommendations.
Kellen, just a quick question. Do you ever meet with the delegates or is that inappropriate?
So we are not allowed to meet with delegates. So we can recommend that the board take action, but we can't meet. I mean, in
As
your
a-
individual capacity.
In a housing commission capacity, we cannot meet with them. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I meet with the delegates for many other commissions, and senators, but yes, never with my housing commission hat on.
Okay.
Yeah, we recommend a report to the board, and it would be inappropriate for us to go to directly with recommendations.
No.
Yeah, to this, did not know that.
Yeah.
Not that I.
Yep, that's a good way to get in trouble.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can you invite them to listen in?
Yeah, and also what came up at the chairs meeting, which surprised me, is apparently we can hold like events, like forums and things. They were saying, they said that like if we wanted to do like a housing forum and invite the whole community to come, we could do that event and staff would support us. That's what Libby said. So that was,
We could do that. I mean, it would just be a public meeting, right?
I think more than a meet, like. they
Like
said
with
it could be
food
in a
and
tent
like the whole thing.
Turning into a fair.
I mean,
It sounded
food
like
is how you get
it's
people
more than
to know
just,
things.
I can look into that.
yeah, that would be helpful to get
Committing.
some more
to
context.
anything.
Well, but I mean, that's because a delegate could come to that. Is that what the point was?
Of bringing that up. It just
Yes.
like that we're able to like go out to the public to talk
Oh.
about things that I didn't think was something that we were really allowed to do before, but they said that we are. So that apparently is okay, and that, you know, you can invite, senators, delegates to come to that, or I guess anyone, but
Well, because on the SITSAC tour that they did, there were delegates on that.
Yeah, and a lot of housing events like.
And there were people,
stuff.
and there were regular people at that too,
okay.
so.
Yeah, so Alex, if you're able to figure out what is the scope of, not saying that I think we should do something like that, but I think having a better sense of what we can do and what we can't do, would be helpful as we, there may come a time when we say, hey, we do think we want to do like a 2-3 hour public forum about, housing issues, and we want to have speakers and like, I don't know. Just is something like that possible? Because I know typically like staff does events, and sometimes we get told about them, and sometimes we don't. Yeah, so it would be good to know.
Okay.
I guess I might as well also talk about the other like joint subcommittee that I had been trying to get permission from the board to do that was shot down, and that was the joint subcommittee with the Human Rights Commission to look at fair housing. So that got shot down twice now, because the Human Rights Commission approached me again and asked, hey, we'd like to move forward with this. And I circled back with Susan and Matt, our co-liaisons, and they had said, no. So that was going to look at fair housing. If you've read the news in the last couple of months about the Human Rights Commission, it is related to that. And again, I think from their perspective, they just don't think it's the best use of our time. They did encourage us, instead of focusing on the affordable housing ordinance, to look at community land trusts, and the new study on low residential. I think it's low residential study. Is that?
Maybe multifamily reinvestment.
Yeah.
So I think this would be another, I guess, the informal, the lot coverage study is it's gonna be called low density.
Yes.
And that's a planning study.
Yes. That is going to be happening because the board, I think, put that in the budget that they wanted that to be happening. So, but the big thing is the board felt like there's more support within the board for community land trusts. And they felt like, it'd be great to have the housing commission look into that. So if people have ideas on what that means and how we can best do that, let me know. And I have notes from my last meeting with Matt and Susan, and there were a couple other things that they mentioned as well, that they thought would be more helpful for us to focus on. I still think the affordable housing ordinance is.
Do you want like a guest speaker on community land trust? Because I can find one.
Can we invite like guest speakers outside of the county?
Yes,
Okay.
we can. There would have to be some sort of vetting, but yes, I think that's doable. I think
They'll pass.
we can also do it in a forum.
They're on the homeownership subcommittee. That person is on Mike Spots.
Oh yeah, Mike is.
It's a community land trust.
Well, and his organization now, Habitat for Humanity for Northern Virginia, they're the ones, they have a community land trust under them. So I think we would need to figure out like, what are we going to bring to the board that they, I think the board has a general understanding of how they work. To me, the big issue is they need a lot of money up front. I don't know how to recommend to the board that like, hey, you need $100 million to like make this happen. We recommend you get $100 million to do this. Like, I'm not really sure what that looks like unless we, recommend creative strategies based on what other localities are doing. I would think Amazon would probably be like, the magic like player there who has potentially the money to make something like that happen, but yeah, just if you all want to give it some thought and figure out, what to do, like, yes, we can have a speaker come if people want to be better educated on it. As far as like what we would then come back to the board with, I'm not sure at this point. Other than we could write a letter saying we support them, we think they should do community land trust, but I don't know that the reason why it hasn't been done is just because they don't like them. Yeah, it's because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Everything's.
Well, and I've seen them done, like, supported by the State Housing Finance Agency, but for places where,
Land costs.
yeah, where land costs, where there's tons of land and land costs are low, not the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was gonna say also, if some people are interested, maybe, like, start, maybe, I don't know how, like, the working group is the like a Google Doc or something to have, a literature review of like studies on different land trusts, how that, that could be part of our letter or work if we want to, people are inclined to.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to put something together, just we have to be careful with the Google Doc that if people are contributing at the same time, it could be classified as a meeting. So if you put stuff up on it for people to read, that's fine. But if it's like people collaborating, we're not allowed to collaborate outside of official meetings. So that unfortunately did not change in the legislation.
Perhaps something like a deadline, like, okay, everyone come to this next meeting if you want, whatever's the easiest way.
Yeah, if people have suggestions, like, please send them my way. Happy to entertain them and figure out what makes sense. It's good to know what the board would like from us, or at least our liaisons for the board. But yeah, I mean, I still think it makes sense to at least consider for the legislative priorities, the affordable housing ordinance, because that's something we've been talking about for at least since I've been on the commission. But any other questions about that? Oh, and with the fair housing piece and that subcommittee, the subcommittee may not be happening, but that doesn't mean we can't keep following up. And I keep having conversations with board members to push things forward. You guys saw in March, they did pass the source of funds protected class that we asked for, both in a letter in January and also in many other letters and advocacy over the last like 4 years. But that was great to see that happen. So there's progress on that front. There's a lot of things in the implementation piece of the fair housing plan that I'd like to see more things happening. And we just got to figure out what's the best way to work with staff and the board to advocate for that to happen. Because apparently it's not a joint subcommittee with the Human Rights Commission. And the reason why it was going to be with the Human Rights Commission is because the Office of Human Rights enforces fair housing, the local ordinance. Okay, great. Any other questions before we move on to development updates? Okay.
Okay, so for development updates, I'm gonna start with the Barcroft third. We'll note the first two use permits we heard as regular items. We've decided to move the use permit updates to development updates for the point that there will be 10 of them. And then this is just the land use piece of it. Each one of these is going to come back to the commission for final action with the actual affordable housing piece of it. So this is really just the planning side of it. So on May 18th, 2024, the county board will consider a third form-based code use permit for the Barcroft Apartments buildings 12 through 16. The subject site contains 114 of the property's overall 1335 unit total. So that's across those 5 buildings 12 through 16. The use permit request, it includes conversion of 17 one-bedroom units to 2-bedroom units and 2 2-bedroom units to 3-bedroom units. The total number of units is not going to change, just the unit sizes are getting bigger. The applicant was able to achieve this because there are existing inefficient unit layouts. And so all the unit bedrooms will meet the Virginia statewide building code and Virginia maintenance code of occupancy for at least 2 people. Additionally, the use permit is also going to include 2 1-bedroom ground floor units that are type A accessible, including 2 new entry canopies above the 2 new accessible entrances, accessible ramps to these units, accessible pathways to the units, outdoor communal gathering space, and 2 new ADA parking spaces. Consistent with the previous use permits, the applicant proposes entry canopies only over the entrances to the accessible units, as all other main entrances have internal vestibules which provide shelter for residents before they access. Yeah. So the applicant proposes entry canopies only over the entrances to the accessible units, as all other main entrances have internal vestibules which provide shelter for residents before they access their units. Another reason is they are afraid, the HALRB, that if they put canopies, that it will put it at risk for getting historic tax credits. So they might not be able to get tax credits, which would be a large financing piece if they make changes to the exterior of the building.
Is that federal or state?
So so the HALRB is Arlington County, but their state
tax credits.
So it could be state is what they're pursuing.
They need to adopt the equitable principles.
Yes.
Put people first as opposed to.
All historical is in Arlington. That's what people use. It's annoying. Everything's historical.
And all right, so 2 more quick points. The units in this space will average up to 60% AMI when they're completed. It will include 30% AMI units as part of the overall financing mix. We just don't have that exact detail on counts yet, and that's another reason we're doing this at development updates. When it comes back as an actual action item, we'll have all those financing details for you. So there have been no concerns raised by the community so far. The proposal has been reviewed by the Design Review Committee, the Historical Affairs and Landmark Review Board, Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, and Planning Commission, where following brief discussion, the Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the use permit. So staff is recommending approval of the use permit subject to the conditions in the staff report. So that is.
I did want to add, just for our legislative priorities subcommittee, to think about the tax credits and, maybe something that says like, you can't be required to sacrifice safety of like residents to and jeopardize getting historic tax credits or something like that, because it's absurd.
And I will put in a plug. It would be great here if we could have a housing commission liaison to the HALRB. That is one of the few commissions that historically we have had. But that, I think the HALRB was supportive of remaining, keeping the historic characters and not adding them. If we have a commission liaison, we might be able to work with them a little bit.
I wrote them a letter. And sway them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So yeah, I definitely hear you.
The buildings would remain perfect forever if no one lived them. So we should just now.
I concur, Helen.
Did anyone want to be the liaison to that fun group?
What is the HA?
It's the it's the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board. Basically worried about historic properties in Arlington and maintaining historic places.
No thanks.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
Have a meeting with their chair to talk about areas of mutual interest and concern.
or do you have a list of when their meetings are?
But I have one question, Alex. So is the like the whole canopy determination. Is that an HALRB, whatever the acronym is, determination, or is that the historic tax credit people determination?
So
Because the historic tax credit people determination is at the state level.
I think there's, the HALRB does not have the power.
Yeah, I thought it was at the state.
But the applicant is requesting this because it allows them to continue to pursue historic tax credits.
Right.
Whereas if they were to add canopies, they would be unable to continue pursuing this source.
Right, so
to their
that's,
capital
that's
study.
where I'm saying is, so I get it more because those historic tax credits is a decent chunk of money. And we want them in this deal because they are putting such deep subsidies into this Barcroft deal. We want them to get as much money into it so that they can keep those subsidies as deep as possible. So I'm willing to give up some canopies
But are
for
they,
them to be able
but
to
are you
put those
saying that
tax credits.
if they would have said yes, the people that state would be a little bit more flexible with things?
The
or-
HLRB is a commission similar to this one. So,
If
they
they,
are supportive of the current proposal to not include canopies, whereas what I'm hearing is this group is not supportive of the current proposal to not include canopies. The proposal, though, is made by the applicant. It is made in coordination with staff, and we give comments back and forth throughout the throughout the process. But yeah, it is something that the applicant put forward because recognizing the canopy issue, they want to be able to have the ability to earn historic tax credits on the property.
which I understand, I would just
So
say
they
like,
were saying we can't do historic tax credits if we put the canopies on.
The ship has already sailed.
Yes.
Potentially, I mean, did they
but
they know that for sure, or that's their dating?
So they're still early in the process, and there are many phases to this and many different in Barcroft is a huge community in itself. So I don't know the exact specifics. I can ask Lisa, who's the Barcroft coordinator, to get us more information on that piece. But I'm not exactly sure, so I don't want to answer quite yet. But I can get an answer out shortly.
I mean, I think it would be interesting just to sit on a meeting to see kind of their thought process as or a group commission, this SHALRB. So if you have dates, I would be interested in.
It's on the website too. Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
if you just Google, yeah, we can.
Bless your hearts.
I don't know, did they
I
like
live in a-
on there?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I'm just like,
My former architect husband called them
Uh,
historical preservationists.
They should, all should,
Like, looks like June 20th is their next meeting,
okay.
or May 15th. But yeah, I can gather more information on.
okay, that sounds good.
I think it would just be helpful, because I know, like, the Commission on Aging, their principles of. Yeah, but something like for housing developments, like they should have the following features that make it more friendly to elderly adults. And one of them is canopies on, all entrances and exits in the building, because they want to make sure that people aren't slipping and, falling.
Can
and
these canopies be put up later on? Oh, cheater.
Unless the tax credits have been collected.
After construction.
Or maybe retracted.
Credits?
Ooh, we're gonna run around and put
But
canopies.
it would be helpful to
Forum to put up
at
canopies.
least, try and get other commissions to be on the same page and putting like residents before the facade. But so I'll reach out to the chair and see if we can have a conversation, and I can understand better where they're coming from. if it was just a tax credit thing, I get that, we can't control what the state does, but we can try to influence what other commissions say and advocate for. Apparently, like I said, my comments, when the Barcroft thing came up were unsuccessful in swaying them previously.
That's it for development updates. The rest of the stuff on the agenda is, just public meetings that happened. I think
Yeah.
our last meeting. So if anyone has any updates on
I did want to give an update on the budget. I don't know how closely people are paying attention, but the board did add $1 million to AHIP specifically for 30% AMI units. So I think that's 10 or 15 units potentially.
yeah, depending on, yeah.
So the work that the Arlington Community Foundation been doing, and I think we had also supported that, ended up resulting in money set aside specifically for 30%. So that was great. The additional $1 million is also great for AHIP. They did not cut the two planning positions. We and I think the planning commission also said to don't cut. They kept those in the budget. Are there any other big housing?
The 1 million addition was the big.
That's awesome.
I think, do you know that the housing grant, all of that went through for the proposal by the mayor's budget, like the two additional positions and.
Oh, on the DHS side?
Yeah.
I'm not positive. I can follow up on that.
It would be really great if we could have,
A budget recap. of some
yes,
sort.
as like kind of, we put out the letter and then we get back from staff or whomever, like, hey, based on what you asked for, here's what actually happened. Because I feel like every year we kind of lose sight, and I don't think the full budget has been published yet. So, and I don't actually know the details. I just see the press release, which is very high level. But that would be super helpful. Get feedback on what was actually in it. Thank you. Homeownership subcommittee.
Nothing to report.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I do have some notes from the Crystal City block
Okay.
plan.
Cool. Yeah.
So this was almost 2 months ago, right? Yeah, March 14th. The agenda was land space and density, site design, building height and form, and architecture. It was from 7 to 9. As noted in the development plan, it was 370 dwelling units. 1/3 of those units will be 2 to 3 bedrooms. And it's 7 stories, which they say is less dense. Because it is considered a 5/2. This is just kind of like site design, because the height is, I know hopefully it's not boring, but it was interesting to me. They can make it with wood, which will be cheaper for them, and not, people ask, why can't it go higher? Because the higher the height, it is more expensive with steel compared to wood. That's why they consider it 5/2. So learn something there. And it was pretty interesting. The park next to it is not part of the space. If you look at it, and the Arlington Planning Commission or the Park and Rec Commission is kind of dealing with that space. I do not. So there will be 2 to 3 bedrooms and studios, 1 bedrooms. I don't have any information about the affordable housing, because I believe they did not have that information at the time of the discussion. But it was pretty interesting going, and I have not seen another meeting update since. So
Yeah, the second one is when they talk about community benefits, including affordable housing. And I think, it's TBD still.
yeah, they were, it's again, it's another JBG Smith property. And they had some design kind of obstacles, because there was a road that VDOT owned questions, so they had to kind of all work around that. Overall, I think it's pretty cool. It's, I've driven past it and I was like, oh, this is where they're going to build this building. So pretty interesting. You know, learning some more construction, jargon, which I think is always also kind of helpful. Like people always ask, why not more density? And it's always, we talk about cost and it's that. So yeah, good meeting. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Alice? Wanted to ask a question.
She probably can't talk. She's probably locked up.
As it's allowing Mike. Sorry, I could.
Huh. Is it working now?
Try it again, Alice.
That's how it's-
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Sorry about, and that's part of the new Teams thing.
Yeah.
That obviously isn't totally figured out. So try to get more on that.
Okay.
But thanks, Alice.
Also, I did want to mention, I don't know if people saw in the news, the Pentagon City Sector Plan got struck down by one of the appellate courts in Virginia on process grounds. I guess they didn't have any issues with what was in the plan, but they claimed that the county didn't give enough information about what was in it, which
Yeah, that the Riverhouse site wasn't in or something. So, yeah, there are some projects that we have in that area that we're waiting for a little bit more guidance on before we know how they're going to proceed.
Yeah.
As that just happened like yesterday.
Yeah, I think the article I saw in Arl Now was saying that I guess the guidance at the state level has been relaxed about what you have to advertise since that
Yes,
happened.
yeah, I'm not into all those weeds, but yeah, it has been relaxed a little.
So the board may just decide to re-advertise it and just pass it, or they could, there's another option, I don't remember. Oh, they can appeal. They can appeal to the, I guess, state Supreme Court and, yes, unverified.
Well, they can't do anything.
I know. If even poor Alice could talk, but.
Also included both employees.
Oh, okay. Just updating us on how's it going. Yeah, which I guess we need to read all that since we're not allowed to use the chat for like official meeting. So Alice is saying that yes, the housing grant funds went through, and that also included both new employees for the housing grant program. So thank you for that, Alice. Yeah, the guest, I've never even seen that before.
I
Yeah,
thought you were supposed to put a name when
it's
you
if you
enter.
don't put a name, yeah.
So they, if they're unverified, they don't.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard with the new policy, but
Okay, anything else under development updates?
I totally forgot that I signed up as TA. I never went to the meeting.
I think the same thing happened to me for the LFC on 12th Street, because I saw
I'm
that
like,
I was
oh,
listed for April 1st, and I was like, oh, that didn't happen.
I wasn't there.
Yeah. So
but I still have.
we should try to get better at
I don't think I ever knew about the meeting, to be honest with you, but
okay,
did you know about your meeting?
I must have, my name's on it, I assume. I mean, I get all the emails, I get so many.
Emails, yeah.
Like 2,000 unread emails, it's
Oh my
like
gosh.
not good, but I get all the emails about all of them, which kind of makes me not pay attention to a lot of them because I just get so many. And Alex is helpful in like, hey, can you reach back out to them and ask? Because there's some things that only I can request, like staff can't.
To get on the SPRCs, it has to be requested by Kellen.
You were the one that didn't
Which is a
forward the
new
meeting to me then.
There you go.
If you are listed as the representative, you should be getting the email as well, right?
Yeah, that's what happened with me with the Crystal City.
Yes, all right, I can, yeah, because you should be on the SPRC list, and so you should.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I do check my emails every day.
Okay.
Get it.
Well, I can check in with planning on that process.
Alex, do we have a date for the next Crystal City one? or heard? Or-
Not yet.
Okay, just.
And Alice, can you give us a preview of site plans are coming before the commission? Because I know you said they were quite a few.
Yeah, so, next month, I think we're likely going to have definitely at least one, possibly two site plans, come to the commission. One of them, which is the most likely to come, would be the NSTA site one. And that's the site down there, where Roadside Grill and NSTA and El Radicchio are. It would be 7-story building with 188 units, and ground floor retail. So that is, one we're gonna be hearing likely next month, and then possibly also Wakefield Manor, which is a little bit down the hill here. But that would be, one that we've actually been kind of waiting here for a few months. And that would be 166 units in a new 12-story building, serving some of the apartments already on the site as well. So those are the two site plans. There's also the electronic meetings policy that we'll have. And then there are also some other larger items out on the horizon, including ownership coming back at the MFPD, Barcroft. And so those are some of the other big things coming down the next few months.
Sounds good. And if you could let us know when the housing grant study, because they presented like the draft report, even though the recommendations still went to the board, and then they said they were still making changes, but they said they weren't going to come back to us once they've made changes. But I'd still really love to see the final and know when that hits been finalized. You know, we're hoping to get, or I was hoping to get some more information on the history of the program past 1991,
Yeah.
I think. 'Cause I think it goes to like,
The one can seem to find
yeah,
it.
it's the 50th year anniversary according
Yeah.
to, I think the Washington Post article.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's been around a long time, but we just apparently don't have a lot of records about it. Okay, anything, so no homeownership subcommittee updates, it's act.
Oh, sorry, just a quick question.
Yep.
Was the 12th Street landing reviewed at the planning commission yesterday? I saw it on the agenda.
I believe, so that's a good question. I'm not sure if it was, right. I actually don't know.
Again, I think I
Because-
watched that, I'm not sure if I saw it.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's right. It was in the PDSP stage, so it's not final site plans yet. But yeah, I believe it was heard last night, unless they pulled it for some reason, but yeah.
And so that was an LRPC, which means it will turn into an SPRC at some point. So,
Yeah, the applicant for 12th Street is planning to have a quick turnaround and submit the SP or the LRPC process for 12th Street Landing is establishing 3 separate land bays on the site. And then they'll come in for final site plans for each of those 3 land bays. But they anticipate to come in pretty quickly with the first one.
And those have to go through the full.
And yes, all of those 3 final site plans will go forward as regular SPRC processes and then come to the commission.
great. Any other questions on development updates? Okay, I know you already talked about SAC. Is there anything else you wanted to share? Okay. HR, we already talked about HALFD. Community Services Board.
At home, we don't have one for, I'm not totally sure what work we're doing right now would intersect with that, but
It's mostly mental health.
yeah, exactly. So
Which is important, but not super related to housing.
to what we're doing right now, that is one of the, so traditionally it was SIDSAC, HALRB and CSB that were like the county board kind of appointed liaisons in between commissions. So historically there's been one, but understanding now there isn't one right now and it might not be the biggest need to
Okay.
fill.
And there's a community service board rep on SIDSAC. So we often get, like, if there's any big burning issues on community services board, we get it
It
through.
kind of makes you the rep, like indirectly. So you can
And
tell us. if
there's
you-
actually Human Rights Commission person on, CITSAC's sort of like the collection of a whole bunch of other commissions on it. So it's sort of, but anyway.
Sounds good. C2E2?
Yes, so the joint subcommittee with C2E2 is organizing, we'll probably have our first meeting this month or next month. So I will keep you updated if you've already told me that you're interested about when that is gonna happen. If anyone else is interested, just reach out to me.
What's it stand for?
Climate change, energy and environment.
With 2 tubes.
And like there's some interesting things coming up with like the green building policy, the revising, things like that. So
Sounds good. Anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned then. Thank you all very much.
wow, that's good. Awesome. Thank you, Peter.
Katie, should I just shoot you an email?